Welcome to the Central Florida Sportscast. It's Adam, and I'm here as always with Eduardo and Danny. Eduardo, Danny, how are you both doing tonight?
Jalen Peachy Keen, Avril Lavigne.
What he
my
said.
God. Avril Lavigne just walked by as you said that. That was
Oh
the
yeah,
craziest
sorry.
thing.
Are we recording? I thought I was
yeah,
just having a private conversation. That's
yeah.
embarrassing.
Well, it's weird because you said it 3 times like Beetlejuice, and she just appeared. I mean, I guess Warped Tour is coming back, so like she has to find time to do something before that.
Yeah, I'm working on getting a sponsorship.
Oh, hell yeah,
Yeah.
brother.
How about you, Eduardo? How are you doing tonight?
Man, I am living the dream. I'm ready to talk some Central Florida sports, even though most of them make me really sad.
Yeah, it's gonna be a little bit of a heavy, sadder episode here at the Central Florida Sportscast.
It's gonna be kind of inverted from the last few. Thinking
There's
about
only
it.
one team that has like any semblance of good news, and then everybody else is sad.
Yeah, you could say like we were like playing out in the sun and like really enjoying ourselves, and now there's like a frost coming in, really kind of dampening the mood. Oh, we'll talk about that a little later, but so it's time for some returns here in Orlando.
Mm-hmm.
But we're gonna start things off with Orlando City. Their season is over. If you've been following along, they made it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals, had an absolutely fantastic season, but just fell short to the New York Red Bulls. The New York Red Bulls ultimately lost in the MLS Cup Final to the LA Galaxy, making the LA Galaxy the first team in MLS history with 6 MLS Cup titles. They are called the Galaxy because when they were founded, they said that we're going to collect so many stars from winning so many championships on our jerseys that we're going to be a Galaxy. And they are living up to that name. So here's hoping we get a star above that beautiful sunny lion coming up here next season. But we do have some information about some players that are going to be sticking around with Orlando City. So the club did exercise their contracts on striker Jack Lynn, Thomas Williams, Javier Otero, Rodrigo Schlegel, and Rafa Santos. Unbeknownst to me, there were some performance-based options. So if certain players hit certain statistics, their contract was going to automatically renew. And that ended up happening for Nicolas Ladero, Cesar Araujo, and I know we mentioned him last week. El Pulpo Pedro Galese is going to be back for another season in Orlando, thanks to the way that he played last season. Danny, Eduardo, how do you feel about the players coming back for Orlando City?
I'm going to be honest with you, Adam. The structure and the way MLS contracts works confuse the hell out of me. They are unlike any other sport. It is very confusing. Can you just kind of go over as high level as you can what a team should be looking for? And then I know there are like international slots that a team can have or like a designated player. I don't know what any of that means. Could you just tell me explain it to me like I'm 5?
Got it, absolutely. And I think it would be really fun. And by really fun, I mean we could put everybody to sleep. It would be like ASMR. If I did an off-season episode for just 90 minutes where I just talked about all of the ridiculousness that is MLS contracts. But kind of high level, so every team gets 3. I believe it's still 3. It might be 4. God knows they change it every single year. But designated player spots. So these are players that don't count against your salary cap. So the idea behind it is if you wanted to go get, at the LA Galaxy when they went to go get David Beckham, it's kind of part of the reason why the designated players began to exist. That was more than the salary for every MLS club. So you would have one player on the roster. It would be 11 versus 1, and David Beckham would have to play every position. So MLS came up with the system of the designated player, basically incentivizing teams to go out and make kind of big splashes. Go out and sign players, these owners or billionaires, go out and spend a little bit of their own money, because if you really want to see a return on your investment, you got to put a little bit of cash up front from yourself. So the MLS has incentivized owners for doing that, and teams get 3 designated player spots. We see a lot of teams do wonderful things with their designated player spots. I know Kaká was the first designated player in Orlando City history. Luis Nani, who we're going to be talking about here shortly, was another designated player. Teams really go out and kind of get those marquee names to come over to MLS to play, to really kind of bring the brand of the league up. In addition to that, we have these Initiative 22 players. So it's basically a designated player spot for a player that's under the age of 22. So the idea being, we're seeing this all the time with MLS, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later when we talk about Facundo Torres and some news that just broke. But all of the time, players are getting picked up from MLS to go to larger leagues. So what the Under 22 initiative is basically incentivizing teams to do is invest in young players. Go and get that 19-year-old player from Jamaica, bring him in. MLS pays part of the salary. That way the club only has to pay a certain amount of the salary. And really play that player so when that player excels and then Arsenal comes calling in 2 years and we sell him off to Arsenal, the league gets a share of that money and the team gets a share of that money. So it's basically kind of an investment strategy here for the team. And then you have your homegrown players. So every club has an academy system. Orlando City has a particularly great academy. We have a lot of soccer talent here in Central Florida. They play over at Osceola Heritage Park. And I believe our U17s, our U15s, our girl U13s, most of them made it pretty far into their respective tournaments. So we have homegrown players that can get called up from these academies. They can either play for the first team, like we see with Thomas Williams. He's a homegrown player that kind of rose up through the academy. He played a little bit at OCB, Orlando City B, which is the minor league team for Orlando City, and got called up to the big show to play for Orlando City some last year. So you have your homegrown players, you have your under 22 initiatives, you have your designated players, and then you have what are called TAM players. So this is total allocated money players. So this is basically just any player. Think of it like a mid-level exception, but for soccer. So any player that falls under a certain salary range, your team can go out and you can sign a few of those players. So they're usually a little higher paid than your average player in MLS, but not quite as highly paid as your designated players. So think of like veterans for MLS. So like some TAM players, Robin Janssen is on a TAM contract, I believe. A player like, I'm blanking, there's a New York Red Bull from Orlando that we kept trying to bring in as a TAM player. The name will hit me when we're talking about the Orlando Magic, and I'll just scream it out. But no, and the contracts are always shifting, so it's really good to be able to keep some of these players in on the contracts that they're on, because what we're seeing in MLS, and we're seeing it in a lot of leagues, is our salary cap goes up every single year. So if you can keep a player that's still playing at a relatively high level on a contract from 2 years ago, 3 years ago, you're actually getting a really good value out of that player. So that kind of opens up the room for Orlando City to go out and sign other players. So that's just, I know that was long-winded, and that is just a brief summary of the MLS roster rules. That's not including the draft. That's not including when we get expansion drafts. But that's just a high level. But it's really good. I think these signings are going to be a really good addition, being able to keep some of these guys wearing purple.
Yeah, a few of them are like pretty, like Pedro Galesi, pretty well known. Cesar Araujo, feels like he's been a City fixture for a little while here. Nicolas Lodero, like another guy that has kind of been around the team for a little while. Rodrigo Schlegel, we talked about him a little bit last week. We both thought, maybe it was time to kind of move on, but maybe the team kind of sees the other way. And like, there is something to be said about glue guys, and he screams glue guy. He screams like he's like the Mo Wagner of Orlando City. He's like the guy on the bench that like is there to like pick people up. Even if he like doesn't necessarily play. Like, I think he's the kind of guy that probably like wants to play, but like would understand if like somebody else and they like signed somebody else that was better. He'd be like, all right, I get it. Like, they're going to play. So he screams like that to me. I think the signings are fine. I am much more interested, though, in everything else happening on the field at this point, especially with what we're going to talk about here in a little bit later.
Yeah, and Schlegel's a really good, he would be a really good third center back. So
Right.
kind of coming off the bench, you can always tell on away games or, admittedly, having an 8-month-old, I haven't been able to watch every single Orlando City away game this year. But I always know, I get notifications on my phone, like push notifications from an app called FootMob. Highly recommend it if you're trying to follow different soccer leagues. It's fantastic. Basically, every major thing that happens, if there's a big save, if there's a big shot, a big scoring chance, all the cards. And every time I would get a notification on my watch that said there was a yellow card in an Orlando City game, I would just go, it's probably Schlegel, isn't it? And then sure enough, I would open my phone and Schlegel will have punched a guy in the face or something during a soccer game. So, that's the kind of guy that you absolutely love to have him on your team. And then when he plays for the opposing team, you just can't stand him. But, the roster is shifting a little bit. This isn't an official announcement or an official story that has broke, but Tom Boggart from MLS.com, he is a very credible source, is saying that Orlando City and Palmeiras out of Sao Paulo, Brazil, are come to terms on principal agreement for Facundo Torres. So this would be a massive, massive, massive departure from Orlando City's attack. He is the leading scorer in Orlando City history. He is basically the kind of guy that you can expect to go out and get a goal when we need one. So this is going to be a big hole to fill in the roster. And Eduardo, Danny, this guy is an all-star. This guy is everything to Orlando City. What do you think moving forward without Facundo Torres this team is going to have to do to kind of fill that hole, fill that El Cuervo-sized hole in all of our hearts?
Well, I know just anytime you lose a player that means that much, it's hard. You not only have to replace the production, but just the branding. Like this is your star guy, and now he's gone, and it's always tough to move on. And I don't know the roster well enough to know guys who might step up in within that void. And I'm not sure what the process is, if there's any sort of players out there that Orlando City can get trading, acquiring through other means, free agency. Um, you'd have to fill me in on who to say here.
Yeah, I think because of the way MLS works in its sort of position and the way soccer is like a global sport, free agency is a much bigger deal than it is for any other American sport. You're going to look for free agency before you look for almost anything else because there's just so much more talent because soccer is like the global sport and every country is playing it. So there is talent all over the country, and you can look almost anywhere and find a great soccer player to kind of pick up. Adam, what kind of contract did Facundo Torres have?
Let's check. This is going to be interesting podcasting because I actually don't know, so I'm going to pull that up real quick. But Danny, not to steal Eduardo's line, it's going to be really hard, and I think people have a problem because they keep trying to replace Facundo Torres' production, and I don't think you can. But I think you can replace him in the aggregate.
Yes, you can recreate him in the aggregate. Let's go.
I was hoping that I was setting that up for you.
Yeah. We'll do a quick little search. Interesting podcasting. Podcasting is a visual medium. Everybody knows that. So Facundo Torres was on a 4-year contract as a designated player. He was going to go through 2026 with 2 club options for 2027 and 2028. So he still had 4 or 5 more seasons potentially with Orlando. Obviously already the leading scorer in Orlando City history. So it's going to be really interesting because it's not like, he was expiring next season. So the terms of the agreement haven't come out. But you have to imagine that Palmeiras is backing the Brinks truck up to get this guy. Orlando City is not going to part with him lightly. I think this is going to be something that Orlando City is going to have a cash influx come in to go sign a big name, get a couple of depth pieces. And that's kind of the way MLS functions as a league is you have a guy, Orlando City got Facundo Torres a few years ago, and he just absolutely went off for us. So now larger leagues and larger clubs are after him. You sell him off for some money, you rinse, you repeat, you go find another guy like Facundo Torres to come in, do the same thing, and you sell him, and you use that money to kind of fill out the rest of your roster. So it's kind of a hard pill to swallow as a sports fan, especially a soccer fan, because almost more so than any league, it's almost an inevitability, unless you are a fan of like one of the few like massive clubs, that if you have a really good player, you kind of have to enjoy him while he's there, because pretty soon he's going to be gone at a bigger club and you'll have a new guy to root for. So there's a common saying in soccer fandom where you support the badge on the front, not the name on the back. And that's true here too. And of course, Orlando City, we have a saying in the fan communities and the supporter section, that forever a Lion. So if this agreement is official, Facundo Torres, you're going to have a bunch of fans here in Orlando rooting you on in Brazil. But we got to kind of look forward to the future and see what we can do to fill out this roster.
Yeah, since we're doing all this contract talk, Adam, I want to hear your opinions on our other two designated players. So our three designated players for the season of 2024 were Facundo Torres, Luis Muriel, and Martin Ojeda. Now, I think we can all say that we were expecting a lot out of Luis Muriel when they made the signing over the last summer, and he didn't start off on the best foot, and he kind of like fell into his role, and I think he successfully went into his role towards the end of the season. However, is it the role of a designated player, somebody who you're paying quite a lot of money to? Probably not, right? Like I don't think he's living up to the kind of contract at Orlando City, but because he was signed as like he was going to be the other attack, right? He was going to be the guy next to Facundo Torres to kind of help alleviate some of that, and that for sure did not pan out.
No, absolutely. And we saw flashes from him. September 21st against the Columbus Crew, he came on, played 32 minutes, scored 2 goals in what was a 4-3 victory against the Crew. So he definitely had some flashes where you would look at him and you would say, listen, this guy, he could put the ball in the back of the net. And he did a lot of really good things passing the ball. So I'm looking at some of his advanced statistics here. He finished the season with 3 goals and 5 assists. His expected goals were 4.86. So, 2 of his goals were penalty goals. So, take with that information what you will. But he obviously underperformed how he actually played. So, we expect if he had this kind of season, he would have a couple of more goals. He finished with 5 assists, and his expected assist was hovering around 6. So that's kind of about the player that we're expecting to get from Luis Muriel, is about 5 goals, 6 assists, which is not the kind of production that you want to see from a designated player. That's a really good homegrown player. That's a TAM player. That's like a 4th option off the bench, coming on and kind of getting you a late goal. But it's kind of really a hard pill to swallow when you have these DPs that don't hit, because those are the big flashy signings that people go to the airport to greet. So it's going to be interesting to see if he bounces back, and obviously here we hope that he does, and we hope that he has a fantastic 2025 season. But kind of looking at the underlying numbers, it kind of looks like that's kind of the player he is. Whereas Martin Ojeda had a decent year. Again, not quite the production you want from a DP. I can kind of see the path for Martin Ojeda a little bit more. just in the fact that he kind of is one of those glue guys too. He kind of gets under the other team's skin. He kind of knows how to push buttons. He got fouled so many times just because he would get under people's skin. I think he led the team in recoveries for 98. And he had 22 possessions won in the final third, which was in the top 25% of all of MLS. So he would get under your skin. He would make you turn the ball over in your own end. But with only 5 or 6 assists, it doesn't look like 9 assists. But his expected assists were 6. So he kind of overperformed this year. So we'll see.
What I'm seeing is, I mean, maybe we're looking at different things. In the 2024 season, Ojeda scored 7 goals and made 13 assists.
Oh, okay. So are you on MLS's website?
Wait, I'm sorry. Across all competitions, yeah. So
okay.
I'm on his wiki page, to be honest with you. So
got it.
It's gonna be wrong.
No problem. So
he's on there bumping up his own stats.
Yeah, he's in there.
Does it change because of the cups and stuff that he plays in?
Yeah, so that could have been all competitions. I'm looking specifically at MLS competitions.
Got it. All competitions is what I read. Got it. That's my fault.
Yeah, and no problem at all. And MLS does this weird thing. So it's always hard to get assist numbers because they kind of treat it like hockey, where if you pass the ball to the player that passes the ball to the player that scores, you still get an assist. And I think we're one of the few soccer leagues in the world that still does that. Most other soccer leagues, you have to actually pass the ball to the guy who scores to get the assist. So, that kind of inflates some of the numbers a little bit. So it's always really hard to kind of judge performance based on assists.
I was just reading a whole thing about John Stockton and the Grizzlies and how they intentionally would be that was not an assist. That was just him passing or doing something. They're no, that was an assist. That's John Stockton. And how they intentionally and now he's the assist leader, and it's to a ridiculous degree that no one will ever catch up, and no one's ever going to be able to catch up because they inflated his numbers so much that John Stockton will forever be the assist leader in the NBA. It's incredible.
Yeah. We kind of function that way in the MLS, kind of bumping those numbers up a little bit, make things look a little better than they were. But no, we definitely need to bring in some either some new DPs, kind of walk away from these contracts, trade off their contract rights, or we need to have these DPs turn their season around. If those are going to be the cornerstones of your team, if they're your designated players, it's really hard to go win a championship unless you have at least 2 of them playing at that level.
So we have a giant hole in the attack right now, right? Because we already were pretty lacking in the attack department and in the goal scoring department, and we obviously have a DP to fill, but we also have a big question mark on the team itself in Duncan McGuire, who for a big portion of last season was on fire. And then, Danny, I don't know if you're aware of the entire debacle that happened with Duncan McGuire.
No.
Adam could probably give you a better summary of it all, but essentially he was signed over to team in, was it Ireland?
Believe it was Ireland, yeah.
He was signed over to a team in Ireland, and then the team in Ireland didn't file the paperwork in time. So he was sent back to Orlando, but he was stuck in Ireland for a while in limbo. And then a week or 2 later, it was signed that they figured it out and he was going to Ireland. And then at the last second, they were just kidding. He's staying in Orlando. And then I think he ended up signing an extension with Orlando. So he's a really confusing player.
Yeah. So it was the Blackburn Rovers out of it. So they're out of
sounds
England.
like them.
England, excuse me.
Yeah, yep, they are out of England.
If an Irish person heard me say that they were Irish and it was an English team, I'm gonna get punched in the face.
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw we were doing a lot of numbers over in Ireland, but probably not after this episode.
No, we've lost all of our listeners in Ireland. We apologize. They came for the Celtics talk. So we thought the first episode was going to scare them off, but they kind of stuck around. But, the team's kind of going through a little bit of a limbo. We have a strong foundational core, which I think is important, keeping those pieces together. And it's always hard to lose like a really big portion of your team, like a Facundo Torres. But, Orlando's done it before. Luis Nani stepped away a few years ago, and he actually just announced his retirement from professional soccer. So he hangs up his boots, third all-time for Orlando City with 31 goals across all competitions. He was a two-time MLS All-Star in 2019 and 2021. He's part of the reason we won the MLS All-Star Skills Competition. And had a really great career at Manchester United, at Orlando City. Was one of those like key pieces for Orlando City during the COVID years and before and after as we built the new stadium. So I think it's really important to kind of look to the past to see like, hey, we've lost foundational pieces before. And we have always responded to that by, signing somebody or having somebody break out. We've been very blessed as Orlando City fans to have, Kaká, to have Kyle Larin, to have Luis Nani, to have Duncan McGuire, to have Dom Dwyer. Like, it just seems that we always find a guy to come out, score goals, and we're always at least competitive, minus a few months in 2018 that we don't talk about.
Let me pencil this in for a future episode. I want to do at least a small segment on Dom Dwyer and both of his stints in Orlando City, because I remember the re-signing of Dom Dwyer when it was the MLS club, and he flies in, and then there were a bunch of Orlando City fans at the airport, and just like how incredible of a time that was. So maybe for a future episode, we can, when there's not as much news, we can kind of dive into him as a player and sort of him.
We'll do a 30 for 30 on it
on Dom Dwyer and Sidney Leroux.
Yeah,
I think it's really interesting. It's a really interesting position for Orlando City to be in, because it's the Wilf family, correct, that owns Orlando City?
Correct, yep.
So you have the Wilf family here, and they're new owners. They just took over the team. Was it last season?
I think it might have been the end of the 2022 season.
Cool. So they're still pretty new. They have only seen success in Orlando City, and they probably have a lot of excitement because this is their new shiny toy, for lack of a better phrase, and they have only seen success, and then they're going to see Facundo Torres walk away. But if I'm the Wilf family and I just bought this new team, typically new owners are pretty good about writing some big checks. I think they're going to go. I think they're going to be like, hey, get us the best player you can. Obviously, they're not going to find fuckface over here in Miami, but sorry, the GOAT, whatever. But I think they're gonna blank check it. I think they're gonna be like, hey, get us the best player you can. I think that it makes sense for an ownership team who just took over a team to want to spend a lot of money, especially after they just went to the Eastern Conference Finals.
And you can kind of see that with the way that the team has been going as a direction, and also the stadium experience. Kind of once the Wilf family took over, they had a big summit because there was a lot of unhappiness within the fan base of the direction the team had been going in. The previous owner wasn't really investing what he should. He was still passionate about the club, but his mind was in a few other places, mostly in real estate. So once the Wilf family took over, they had a big summit with a lot of the supporters, and they asked them, what do you want to see? What are you missing that's going to make you happy? Because that's ultimately what their goal was. And a lot of people said kind of some things that we've been echoing throughout this podcast, which is Orlando City used to be so uniquely Orlando. Even from the USL days, we still chant about how much we hate the Tampa Bay Rowdies, a minor league soccer team that plays in the USL that we don't even play anymore, except for US Open Cup. Maybe every couple of years we'll play them once, and still one of our main chants is about how much we hate them, because the Orlando culture was so built upon itself about being Orlando, and it's us versus everybody else. So the supporters said, listen, the stadium needs to feel more like Orlando. So the owners came in and said, okay, what kind of local restaurants can we get to come in here to put food stalls in to really make this place feel like Orlando? So we had the Coop open up in the stadium, which is now the only place that you can get the Coop chicken tenders is at Inter & Co. Stadium. We had Hollerbach, a great German restaurant in Sanford, open up. We had, all kinds of local businesses open up in the stadium to kind of really embrace that culture of Orlando. So I think that the Will family, I think you're exactly right. I think they're willing to spend that money. They're willing to keep the fan base happy because we see what happens when the fan base is happy. The stadium is packed. People are wearing Orlando City jerseys, walking around Epcot, drinking before the games. It's got such a good culture here that as long as the fan base feels like you care, that we're going to come out and support. And I think that's kind of a trend that we're noticing across the MLS because support has been really, really, really good for the MLS. I saw a recent poll that the MLS now ranks second in attendance in the world, just behind the Premier League. So we are the second largest soccer league in terms of attendance outside of the Premier League, which is the top flight in England. That's your Arsenals, your Manchester Uniteds, your Liverpools. So I think it's just speaking to what we're doing here in America for the sport, and what is really transpiring in these smaller markets. I know Orlando is a smaller market. We fill the stadium up. People kept saying soccer doesn't work in the South. Look at Nashville. Look at Orlando. Look at Atlanta. Look at Charlotte. Soccer is here. And I think you can either embrace that. You can kind of jump aboard. It's not for everybody. I welcome you too. But it's not stopping. I think the trajectory is it's going to overtake the NHL. I think within the next 5 years, it's going to be one of the top 4 sports in America.
You heard it here first, folks.
It's a Belva hot take.
I don't even think that's that hot of a take. I think if you look at how much of a melting pot the United States of America is, and how many people are from other countries here and everything, and I think Americans have a knack for being very kind of closed off in what is happening in America as far as sports are concerned, and as far as everything is concerned, but specifically sports, which we're talking about here. And they don't really have a frame of reference to understand just how much of a global sport soccer is. I mean, and even past that, right? If the number one watch sport in the world is soccer. If I were going to ask you what the number 2 most watched sport in the world is, what would you say it is?
Cricket.
It's cricket, which I feel like if you ask any American, they'd be like, well, it's got to be American football, right? It's got to be football, right? And you'd be like, no, brother, it's a sport we don't even play here. That's how big the world is and how many other people are playing all of these other sports. So, I think it's a really good thing that the United States is kind of getting on board with everyone because if there's one thing we've learned is that the United States has maybe the best athletes in the world in a lot of different ways. And you should be finding homegrown United States talent to kind of share this, the world's game. So it's a good thing. And I think you're right. I also have never watched hockey. Sorry, Danny. And so, I mean, being in Florida where there's no snow or ice, it's kind of hard. I mean, the Lightning are here, but I got to drive to Tampa, whatever.
Well,
God
you don't.
God forbid.
Yeah, God forbid you have to drive. And you don't actually even have to drive to Tampa to watch some great hockey because the Orlando Solar Bears are here in town playing at the Kia Center. And they are playing, I'm not going to say great hockey, but they are playing hockey.
They sure are.
They're still hovering around 500. We're not going to spend a lot of time on the Solar Bears this week. I'm kind of doing some digging, and we're going to have a little bit of a longer Solar Bears segment for next time. But just kind of want to go over how the season's going. The Solar Bears are having a very exciting season in the fact that we are in top half of the league in both goals allowed and goals scored. So all of the Orlando Solar Bear games are pretty high scoring. And they're doing a lot of really fun promotions. I don't know if you've seen that they did an underwear toss.
Yes.
So, they do a teddy bear toss every year, and a lot of hockey teams do that, and it's great. And it's a great way to support different charities around the holidays to provide toys for underprivileged children, which is fantastic. What a great thing to do for the community to really be embraced by the sports team. And, for some humility to enter sports. I don't know if either of you saw that during one of the teddy bear tosses, not the Solar Bears, because we're a classy organization, but during one of the teddy bear tosses, there was just a fight between two of the players. Like people were throwing teddy bears on for like kids. They're like, "Yay! Like the kids of the community are gonna get these toys, and that's so great." And these two players were just absolutely decking each other while the lights were dim and people were throwing teddy bears. It was.
I don't know if this was the same game, but there was another teddy bear toss incident where a player was frustrated by the game. He picked up some of the teddy bears and started throwing them back into the crowd.
Boo this man.
It's like, this is for charity. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
I think he to get fined.
Yeah,
Oh my god.
I know we've said this before, but we need to go to a game. I'm looking at tickets right now, and tickets start at less than $20. I'm looking at lower bowl, center ice for $40.
Yeah,
and
it's a great time.
Yeah, compare that to a Magic game where $40 is going to get you all the way in the back behind one of the goals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we have a couple of games coming up this week. We have a match on Friday against the Florida Everblades, one of our largest rivals. And then a home game on Sunday against the Greenville Swamp Rabbits.
I love minor league names.
Me too.
Solar Bears just beat the Savannah Ghost Pirates.
Yeah, they're a new team in the ECHL over the last couple of years. And admittedly, Ghost Pirates is a great name.
I agree.
It is.
But, and a lot of people kind of, not to play like Danny for hockey, but I'm not a Tampa Bay Lightning fan. I know this is going to come as a surprise. So I'm a Washington Capitals fan. I've been a Washington Capitals fan my entire life. I am staring at a Washington Capitals jersey that's in a frame next to my office. That's signed by the entire team. Got Ovechkin front and center. I've been a Capitals fan my entire life. And to kind of speak about the ECHL, the league that the Solar Bears play in, Spencer Carberry, who is the head coach of the Washington Capitals, who are in first place as we're recording in the entire league. Spencer Carberry was the head coach of the ECHL affiliate for the Washington Capitals, the South Carolina Stingrays. And a few of the players that are performing really well on the Washington Capitals right now came up through the system. They played at South Carolina, they went to Hershey, and now they're playing in Washington. So this is a really good opportunity to come see some players that in 2 or 3 years, or even some coaches that 2 or 3 years down the line, we may be seeing at Amalie Arena in Tampa lighting up for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And you can see them for, $20?
Mm-hmm.
It's a great night out. And, I can't implore you enough to go out and really watch the Solar Bears. It's a lot of really fun hockey. Aaron Luchuk, who's our leading scorer, believe he was just named captain this season or earlier this season. He has the most goals on the team. He has 8 assists. He's just absolutely tearing it up. And the team is fun, and it's still early in the season. We're still fighting for the Kelly Cup and to get into the playoffs. So go out and support them.
Man, I'm seeing the logo now for the Savannah Ghost Pirates, and it's cool. The
ECHL logos are so cool.
Not all of them. I think.
Yeah, there's some bad ones. The wheeling nailers.
Jacksonville could do some work. The Jacksonville. Quick, think of a name for a hockey team.
Jacksonville Icemen. That's right.
That's right. The
Jacksonville. I want to say Jumbo Shrimp, but that's the baseball team.
No, yeah. They're the Jacksonville Icemen.
Mm-hmm. Which has to stink for their fan base because, you've got the Florida Everblades and the Orlando Solar Bears, in the same state, and you're like, I guess let's go Icemen.
Yeah, that's. real tough because
Yeah.
both of the other ones sound so cool.
Yeah, absolutely. But, we have a lot of really fun things happening in Orlando with the Solar Bears season still going on. And we had some exciting news over in Oviedo with UCF. Danny, you wanna touch base on the winter advisory that we got?
Yeah, I know everybody better be bundling up.
Yeah, because of the
It's
ice
getting,
at the Solar Bears hockey game.
Yeah,
There,
because the
yeah.
Icemen.
because of the
The
Icemen.
Icemen are coming. That's right. The Icemen have all committed to UCF, and they are going to be on the team, all of them.
Yeah.
No, the real Iceman is coming back to town. Yes, that's right, folks. You heard it here first. Scott Frost confirmed to be the next head coach of your UCF Knights. And that is something we floated last week as a possibility, and we maybe weren't so hot on the idea, but I think something we did not mention that has really been evident is just how much it's energizing the fan base, which I think is probably the most important thing at this point. You have all the good memories from 2017. That that goal is now like in sight. Like you got the guy who led you there before. He can get us back into the into contention there and running Big 12. Which, you know what? If you want to be an optimist, I think it's definitely possible. Um, it was only 7 years ago, so think about recruits coming up 16, 17, 18. They were early 10 to 11 years old when UCF was making that run. So that's kind of like your formative years there. They have that image of UCF knocking off Auburn in the Peach Bowl. And, it's not like, talk about some teams like their championships and stuff all seems like ancient history to these kids. But, I think Scott Frost can go into the recruits' living rooms and say, hey, I did this before. Come help me do it again. Build back that UC Fast team.
And Scott Frost has such, I thought this when he was at Nebraska too. He has such a good. He's a really good interview. He's really good in press conferences. I think he's going to be really good, like you mentioned, energizing the fan base, and I think we're seeing that. I haven't seen any numbers, but I've seen a lot of accounts talking about how NIL donations are up and donations to the university are up overall. We saw Dylan, I'm going to mispronounce his last name. I think it's Rizk.
I think it's just Risk.
The freshman quarterback that started a few games last year. He tweeted out, "Let's go," with like 6 O's when they announced Scott Frost.
He was very excited.
So, being able to keep some of those young players at UCF and excited about the hire, because, it's the transfer portal, came for UCF. We talked about it last year. It comes for everyone. But being able to hold on to what you can with a hire is really important.
Yeah, I think there probably weren't a lot of names that could come in and really convince players to stay like he can. Which you're going to need to get some talent to stick around because recruiting obviously hurt a lot by just the circumstance of the season and Gus leaving, not really doing all that much before he left, recruiting wise anyway. But looking at rivals after early signing day, UCF was 73rd ranked class nationally, which is dead last in the Big 12. So obviously, transfer portal, like we said, that did open up today, actually, officially. So there are a lot of players putting their names out there, looking to be on the move, and I think the timing of the hire really needed to get that done before the portal opened, and we'll see if Scott's able to get some good talents down here. What you said about he's a good interview and good at press conferences. I really did like his line. He said, "When you're climbing the ladder of success in life, nobody tells you to stop where you're happy." Which it's obviously he went to Nebraska and did not do so hot there. He's kind of been floating around. He was most recently an offensive analyst with the LA Rams. But it seems like he's, it's not just like let's try run it back. It was like he wants to be here and he wants to achieve what he did before at UCF, but like in this new environment where they're in the Big 12 and you have this expanded playoff. And if they have a season like they did in 2017, like there's no denying, well, we'll see what the committee says, but there's no denying that team, you know, a ticket to the show.
Yeah, I mean, look at Arizona State winning the Big 12 championship, and nobody. I don't think anybody had Arizona State in the playoff had they not been a conference champion. So it's all about. It's kind of like how March Madness functions with the conference champions. If you are in the Big 12, the ACC, the Big 10, or the SEC, if you're in one of the four bigger conferences and you can win your conference championship, more likely than not, I'm not entirely sure about the wording of it, but you're going to go to the playoff.
Essentially, it's the as of now, obviously things change all the time, especially with the slight controversy. Um, but the top five conference champions, as far as CFP committee rankings,
Mm-hmm.
are all guaranteed a spot. The top four being given the first round bye. So obviously, it just how it's going to work out is one of those the four power conferences will pretty much always have four of those five. It was a little close this year. If Tulane hadn't slipped up against Memphis, I think they probably would have been ahead of Clemson. I mean, obviously, who knows? It's all subjective according to the committee, so they can
Mm-hmm.
massage the numbers however they want. But there was a good chance that the Big 12 was going to miss if, or well, not sorry, the ACC. I guess it depends. I mean, there's a lot of things that could have shaken out, but
Yeah.
there was a good chance that one of those two conferences would have missed had Tulane won out to end the season. But anyway, like I said, that's all going to change to guarantee the SEC and Big Ten 5 spots each.
Yeah. They're just going to play their own little tournament, and then everybody else can play for third and fourth place, and it'll be great.
Yeah,
And by great, I mean awful. But, I think we mentioned last week about, what it would take to energize that fan base and, really making UC fast a thing again. And when we think about that era of Scott Frost football here at UCF, I think about the spread offense. I think about them running up tempo. I think about them taking deep shots downfield. They were a run-heavy team, but when they took shots downfield, they were taking shots downfield. I mean, I think about Mackenzie Milton. So I think this is exactly the kind of offense it's just really fun to watch. So I think that there's probably, I think Danny, I'll let you speak on this too, but I think there may be a little bit of an uphill climb just given where the team currently is roster-wise. But that's why the transfer portal exists. Go out and get a couple of players and see what happens.
Yeah. I would say though that there is no. I'm trying to be. I don't want to offend anybody here, but as far as the power conferences go, the Big 12 is one of the weaker ones. So it could be a bit of a quicker rebuild than if they were in a different conference. And, but so I think that works out. It is obviously a step up from the American, just top to bottom. So there are going to be hard games in there. But I mean, you saw Arizona State, they were picked preseason to finish last in the conference, and here they are, conference champs. So really, it just takes a good offense and some good players in that offense, and you got a shot. Now, whether it's, have a good year here or there, or build a sustained thing, we'll see. But I do think, like, if he can get those Florida players that maybe overlooked, or even, they don't even have to be overlooked. Maybe they just want to choose UCF over the other schools, or like the big national names. But, just get some of those talented players. Like we said, Florida's a hotbed. So get some of those guys to stay home and get cooking.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be really exciting to watch them do that. And I think the Big 12, you mentioned this, and I think you hit the nail on the head here. The Big 12 is going to cannibalize itself every year. Because I don't think there is a huge separation at the beginning of the year from the best Big 12 teams and the worst Big 12 teams. I think that it's the kind of year I would be really shocked. A team would really have to get some lucky bounces and have a really good roster construction to go undefeated in this Big 12. I just think that's just the way that this conference works. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think that UCF has really good opportunity here to kind of use Scott Frost to kind of bring the city back together how it was in 2017 supporting this team.
You just got to worry that rather than take a true, like, next step, like, the worry for me is that rather than taking a new next step into, like, the future of UCF football and sort of the future of the sort of the culture and the team itself, you instead are sort of looking backwards and trying to see, like, what if we can have one last good ride with Frost at the helm, and we can go back to our glory days and stuff. But, like, I brought up Dom Dwyer earlier when we were talking about Orlando City, and I worry about stuff like that. Obviously, at the time, the Dom Dwyer signing I think was great, and we all were really excited about it. It seems like the general consensus from UCF fans is that we're really excited about Frost. But I worry that clearly his last stint didn't go very well in his last in Nebraska, and I would hope that they would be looking forward rather than looking backwards. Now, I could be 100% wrong. He could come in here, he could have another great run, but the worry that I have is that his run with UCF last time was 2 years. He was here for 2 seasons. He wasn't here for a long time. He didn't really build like a culture and a program and cultivate it and do all these things. He was here for a couple seasons, had a great time, and then dipped off to Nebraska at his first opportunity. Like, no shade to him. That's his alma mater. He wanted to go over there and coach. I get it. But we're not talking about a guy who built something from the ground up here in Orlando, from beginning to end. We're talking about a guy who had a couple good seasons for 2 years and then kind of left. And so I worry that, not that those seasons were a fluke, but that they seem to be everything falling right into place and being sort of perfect. And what happens if everything is not perfect this time?
I think that's totally legitimate concern. Obviously, like you said, you had the one amazing season, but everything after that he did at Nebraska just did not live up to that. And it's, maybe it was a flash in the pan type thing, and just every single element that you needed to have that success just happened to be exactly what it needed to be. So there certainly is a risk. I would say, though, he is still young. He's 49, so which is young still in coaching. And after Nebraska, like I said, he most recently was with Sean McVay over in LA. So he wasn't coaching with as an assistant or anything, but he was in that organization, which Sean McVay is one of the good offensive minds in the NFL, and I mean, they just had a shootout win over the Bills who a lot of people think are one of the favorites in the NFL. Well, I guess if there's contenders, they would be one of them. Um, so even though the Rams have been kind of up and down this season, they still got some offensive firepower with old Matt Stafford. Um, so I would think hopefully that they're not gonna rest on their laurels from that 2017 season, and they will still be forward thinking, even if it is with the guy who was there before. Um, but it does remain to be seen. But I don't know. The what it means to the fan base, I think, can't go overlooked. Especially as Adam said, if the NIL donations are going up, that can help a lot.
Yeah, and I think UCF is they have a pretty interesting road in front of them, because I feel like there's the opportunity to do something really, really interesting, because I don't know if you know who Ole Miss's running back coach is currently, but it's Kevin Smith, former UCF running back, top 5 all-time in yardage for running backs in college football. And, he was here as a coaching intern in 2015 and 2016, so right before Scott Frost got here. And then he went over to FAU for a couple of seasons. He went to Ole Miss, came back to Miami for a year, and then back to Ole Miss. And, it wouldn't surprise me if Scott Frost and Terry, the athletic director, aren't reaching out saying, hey, how would you like to have a little bit bigger of a role on this coaching staff? Because if we're really chasing those good vibes and, if we're really trying to engage the fan base, I think Kevin Smith, running back coach at UCF or co-offensive coordinator, could be really interesting.
Yeah, if we're just trying to have like a really fun season, let's just bring them all back. Everybody. How do we get RJ Harvey to pretend he's a year younger? Like, what do we got to do to like just bring everybody back and let's just have a fun time next season?
I can't even imagine what RJ Harvey in Scott Frost, if he's running the same offense in the offense that Scott Frost ran when he was here, RJ Harvey would have absolutely he would have eaten.
He was literally already the touchdown leader for UCF. Imagine him in that offense.
Yeah, it would have been wild. And that's the kind of exciting thing is, even if the season isn't, what people expect the first year, he runs an exciting football program. So at the very least, you're not going to be bored, which is a lot of fun. Last name I'm going to throw out, if we're just throwing out good names, good vibes, offensive assistant, Mackenzie Milton at the University of Tennessee. Come home. You're going to be the quarterback's coach.
What role can we get for George O'Leary?
George O'Leary, he could stand on the sideline. And
yeah.
You know what? I think it would be really interesting. And UCF was doing this a little bit after 2017 because they were, they obviously were riding high where they were going across the state. And they had like kind of a fan event in Gainesville, and then they had one in Tallahassee, and then they had one in Tampa, and one in Miami, and one in Jacksonville. And they were kind of going all around the state being like, hey, we're here, 2017 undefeated season. We just beat Auburn in the Peach Bowl. Look at us. And kind of engaging the fan base across the state. I would love to see something like that on a much smaller scale with Scott Frost around Orlando. Have him go down into Kissimmee and speak. Have him come over to Claremont and speak. Have him in Altamont Springs. And just like these small events, these little pop-up events, you could bring Nitro out, have Scott Frost give some kind of speech, hand out free UCF t-shirts. Just something to really like re-engage that fan base. Because attendance wasn't really down this season, But you didn't see the kind of spirit that you saw a few years ago, and I think that is actually really what's missing. Because the season didn't go as anyone expected, but those seasons happen in college football. If you've been watching college football long enough, inevitably your team is going to have a down season, and that just happens. But I would really love the fan base to get energized, because I think, and I'm hoping, that Scott Frost can do some special things here in Orlando again. And there are some special things happening in Orlando, because at the Kia Center, there is a team. They play basketball. Do you know that, Eduardo? That Orlando has a basketball team?
Unfortunately.
The Solar Bears play basketball
Solar Bears
too?
play basketball.
Yeah. And so
Predators are
they
back,
have the most,
but they're a basketball team now.
they have the most penalty minutes as a basketball team. They just keep punching each other.
It's like, guys, you cannot do this.
Yeah, people keep throwing teddy bears while they're trying to shoot free throws. It's really weird. But Eduardo, what's going on over at the Kia Center?
Man, not a lot of good stuff. All right, that's a lie. There's some good stuff. So on the positive front, the Orlando Magic continue to be undefeated at home. They have 10. They are the only undefeated at home team in the NBA. And I will also say they are the only professional sports team in the United States to be undefeated at home in the year 2024. They have not lost, or not since 2024, but since the Super Bowl, right? So since the Super Bowl,
I believe it's since the Super Bowl.
Since the Super Bowl, the Orlando Magic are the only professional sports team in the United States to be undefeated at home, because they won all their home games in the playoffs and they lost all the road games in the playoffs, and that's how they got eliminated.
Hang the banner.
Hang the banner. So there are some good things going on. However, if you are an Orlando Magic fan and have been one for a while, you know that injuries have been plaguing this team, and it feels like every time Orlando is on its way to kind of get itself out of the rut it has been in over the last decade, a key injury will come in and will derail any sort of momentum. You saw it with Victor Oladipo pretty early, but it wasn't as much as his Indiana years. You saw it with the year Markelle Fultz came back and was starting to look like himself again, and then tears his ACL. You saw it for years and have seen it for years with Jonathan Isaac. Anytime he starts to put together any sort of competency or competent season on the court, he gets injured. And now we are seeing it with both Paolo Banchero and, unfortunately, Franz Wagner suffered a torn right oblique. He is out indefinitely and will be reevaluated in 4 weeks. If you remember, Paolo Banchero's original, the tweet that Shams put out was that he was going to be reevaluated in 4 to 6 weeks. Franz is just 4. I think they're starting to learn a little bit more about that injury. Do you guys know the last player besides Paolo and Franz to have an oblique injury like this? It's a rare injury. It doesn't happen very often in the NBA. It's usually more like a baseball injury.
I think you may have said it before, but I do not remember if you did.
I'm assuming that person was throwing a basketball into peach buckets.
It was an Orlando Magic player, actually.
Oh, was it really?
It was Cole Anthony in the year 2022.
Okay, more recent than I thought.
Yeah. So, and
he could still have been throwing stuff into a peach
true.
basket. We don't know.
That's true.
This year is cursed with injuries. It feels like every young player, any team that's doing any well is starting to see the injury bug happen to them. You had Chet Holmgren over in OKC literally break his hip, which is insane for an NBA player. You have the Indiana Pacers have been ravaged with injuries. They have no center right now. Same thing with the Thunder for a little while there. You had Mitchell Robinson out all season for the Knicks. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, because anytime he plays, it might ruin their number one offense. I guess adding any sort of defense is probably better. You have who else was out? There's a lot of names. Kawhi, obviously, because he can't stay healthy. So there are a lot of names, the people that are out this season. Also, I don't know if you might not have seen, I just saw Scotty Barnes just injured his foot in a game against the Knicks, and they had the camera on him, and people were reading his lips, and he was saying, "I can't feel my foot." And that is very, very, very bad, and I wish him a very speedy recovery because that sounds awful. It's not going to be a good injury if that's the case. So, yeah, real tough year for injuries in the NBA, but losing Franz Wagner when he was putting up not just like star numbers, not just all-star numbers, but he was putting up superstar numbers in his time. I mean, he had more 30-point games than like Luka and like Jokic this year. Like he was on like this like insane tear, like this insane run, to the point where he was like, I don't think he was like a favorite or anywhere even close to a favorite to win MVP, but like if you were gonna give me like a short list of like the 10 best players of the season so far, he'd probably have been on there because he was playing so well, and it kind of like dragged this Orlando Magic team to a third seed in the East, and to see him kind of go out with that oblique injury is just really frustrating and really sad. And it is. I understand these guys are young. They're 23 and 22 apiece. Paolo's 22, Franz is 23. There is a lot. I say it all the time, like they're very young. You got to give them time and everything. But let me just be like a fan for a second and tell you how sad it is to just be so excited for a season, to then have your star player go out with an injury and be really sad, and then suddenly your second in command comes out there and it's like, don't worry guys, I got this, and then you go on a crazy tear, and then suddenly he goes on a tear in his oblique, and then now you are down both of your stars, and it's just a really frustrating time as a Magic fan. All of that being said, the Orlando Magic are currently the 3rd seed in the East. They have a record of 17-9. So that is 8 games above 500. If they can stay above 500 until Paolo Banchero gets back, and if he can, sort of resume the production that he was doing, which he's not going to do right away, but if he can get back to form, to the production he was doing at the beginning of the season, there is reason to believe that, we can kind of weather this storm until Franz Wagner gets back. Now, if we look ahead to the schedule for the Orlando Magic, it does not look pretty the next few games. So they've got their in-season tournament game against the Milwaukee Bucks at Milwaukee. That's going to be on Tuesday. That's going to be a really tough game. Unfortunately, if you were going to ask me to bet, I would bet that the Magic probably do not win that one. Giannis has been on an absolute tear. He's having another historical season where he scores a shit ton of points. It is incredible. I don't think he wins that one. And let me read to you the next 6 games. So it's Milwaukee, and then OKC, Miami, Boston, Miami, New York, which is just absolutely brutal. It's going to be a brutal few days for Magic fans, because that would have been a brutal stretch with Paolo and Franz. Those are all very difficult teams. Even though Miami's having sort of a down season, they're always very physical. They're always a tough team to play because of their play style. Obviously, Boston is Boston. Oklahoma City is Oklahoma City. And you already saw how you matched up with New York the first time you played with them, where they beat the piss out of you and embarrassed you on national television. And so you kind of don't feel good about almost any of these games, especially without Paolo and Franz. Now, the hope is that we start seeing Paolo back sometime in this group of games. For our sake, I hope he miraculously makes his return in the next 10 days and is there for the Oklahoma City game that we will be at. Especially now that there's no Franz. If Paolo's not there, it's going to be a rough game to watch in person. It's not going to be... It will not... We already are every time we've played Oklahoma City, they've always seemed to kind of get the better of us. It's one of those... they just seem to always... It's always their night when they play against us. You have guys like that, or even teams like that. It feels like it is always Oklahoma City's night when they play against Orlando. They just always just kind of have it on, whatever it is.
Yep.
And so that'll be a tough game to watch if Paolo's not back. And honestly, even with Paolo, if that's his first game back, you probably you can't expect too much out of him because he's just coming off his first major injury, and he's probably going to be on some sort of minutes restriction, and like he probably won't be as physical or as conditioned as he was at the beginning of the season. So even if he comes back, and when he does come back, you probably can't expect him for at least another few games to kind of get back into form. And so, all of that being said, what are your guys' thoughts on the Franz injury and how the immediate future is looking for the Orlando Magic?
I was honestly gutted because it kind of took me by surprise. I believe I was walking through Liberty Square at Magic Kingdom with Taylor and my daughter, and we were having a great day, and I got a little notification on Twitter that Shams had tweeted something, and I was like, oh, little Sham tweet, let's see what's going on. It's about the Orlando Magic. Oh, it's about Franz Wagner. Oh, no. And I got a pit in my stomach because this team, and there were a few seasons where we just lost an exceptional number of minutes from key players due to injury. And I'm not concerned about the long-term, outlook of this team because of these injuries. But what I am concerned about is, obviously it's never good when you have players that are struggling through injuries. They could retweak something. We've seen this with Jonathan Isaac, kind of battling through injury history throughout his career. So that gets you a little worried. But I think the biggest worry for me is the momentum that we had and kind of losing a little bit of that, but also us not getting our roses that we deserve, playing the way that we are without an all-NBA caliber player in Paolo Banchero and a should be certified all-star playing at that level of Franz Wagner, that the media is going to do what the National Basketball Association media does and say, well, now that they've lost their two stars, there's no point in talking about the Orlando Magic anymore. And, we're going to go back to the island of misfit toys for a few weeks. No one's going to pay any attention to us, even though I think the team is still playing pretty good basketball.
Yeah, the team won their game just yesterday against the Phoenix Suns, and they did it, it didn't look very different from any of the team's other wins throughout this season because, you lose a couple offensive players and then maybe that takes out your ceiling a little bit, but the floor for Orlando is still very high because most of their points and the way that they play the game is off of defense. They're going to defend at a high level. They're going to get a high number of deflections, a high number of steals, and they're going to translate great defensive plays into easy offense opportunities. They also play defense a little different than everybody else in the league in that their goal is to limit number of possessions. So some of the defensive metrics don't favor Orlando because they're not necessarily a low percentage per possession team, even though they're not as high as OKC, but that's because they are limiting your total number of possessions to the point where you can't score as many points as you probably want to. So you give guys less of a chance to kind of look to get good looks. Not only are you being contested heavily on your looks, but you're also getting fewer of them. And so with that brand of basketball, I can see Orlando still winning, 500. I can see them still making 500 basketball. Now, this stretch that we're about to go through, that's gonna be the tough one. That's gonna be a real tough ask because we've seen this team go cold. We saw them go really, really, really cold in Madison Square Garden. And that's just something that can happen to this team. And without your two main offensive initiators, that's going to happen. It is. You can't. There's only so much of a beating a team can take before you start to go, all right, we get it. You guys are injured. It's, take your time to get ready. But Kevin Durant was obviously out for the Phoenix Suns. They were missing Kevin Durant and they were missing Yusuf Nurkic, but they still had Devin Booker and Bradley Beal. We were missing Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner, who are the team. They are as far as offense is concerned, they are the offensive engines of this team. And so we had to figure out how to play basketball around them. It is really sad. Now, let's put our positive caps back on now that we've commiserated for a little bit. This is an opportunity, as these things always are. There are guys on the bench that were not getting rotation minutes that are now going to be given, whether they like it or not, the opportunity to contribute to this team. And it is an opportunity, one, for these guys to prove that they are, foundational pieces or pieces of this team moving forward, or it's an opportunity for the front office to see, hey, these guys, they're not actually going to be part of the future moving forward. And I think the idea of a consolidation trade has been, it's something that like Magic fans have talked about for a long time, because Orlando just has a lot of talent. They have a lot of players, and they just do not have enough playing time to go around for some of these guys. And the fit you can kind of question, even to the point with some of them. There are some players that people think we should move on from. There's a whole lot of stuff there. And so especially at this point, I don't think Orlando, if they're going to make a consolidation trade or a big trade or a big move, I don't think it happens until the offseason. I don't think they make a move this season, because how do you get a good idea of what this team can be in a good enough sample size without having your two main guys as part of the team? Even with all the success that we had with just Franz on the court, you can't really evaluate what's going on until you have both Paolo and Franz on the court, and then you've seen them through enough games to decide, okay, this is what the team actually is.
Yeah, I think that's totally logical. You have, I don't know, it's I don't want to say it's like there's still a lot of basketball to be played, and as we said, if they can kind of weather the storm and get around 500, when you get both guys back and healthy on the court, that's the team as it should be. Hopefully, God forbid any more injuries to any other players. But I forgot what my whole train of thought there was going to be. Wait, yeah. So you get the two guys healthy, Franz and Paulo back, and then you can, like you said, you really evaluate. Hopefully, they are able to come back and contribute by playoffs, and then you can see what type of noise you can make in that situation. So I don't want to say like this year is already like a punt. If they were out for the season, then definitely.
What?
You have these two guys that going forward are going to be like huge parts of the team and major contributors and big names in the NBA. So it's still within reach. It's just harder. It's getting the crystal ball is a little cloudier right now.
I mean, they're 8 games above
so
500, and the next team is the Knicks. They're 14
Yeah.
and 9, so you have a little bit of a cushion on them, and then you have a really big cushion on the
Yeah.
Heat, who are the 5th team at 12 and 10. You have a gigantic cushion on even just like
Yeah.
you could fall. Like I could see this team, like if everything goes wrong, fall all the way down and still like maybe even just be a playoff team, and like at the very worst they would be a play-in team. Like they're going to make the
So I don't
postseason.
think they're going to get below
No,
10.
no,
Yeah,
no.
absolutely.
And so I think especially because of the run that Franz and the team went on before he got injured, that they won. It was 12 of 14, and so that really set them up for this stretch that we're going to have now, which is against really difficult teams. And maybe, honestly, if you were going to have a stretch where a bunch of guys, their key guys are out, maybe this is the best one to have, because these are going to be tough games anyway. And now you can just be like, well, we don't have our best players. We don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, we'll see again with Paolo.
Exactly.
We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Well, you had said the other day that this was, I think, during the Sixers game, that the Magic had the most road games. They had the most back-to-backs at this
And they
point.
had the most
and,
games played,
I mean,
period.
Right, yeah. So during the back half of the season, obviously the home games are going to be more frequent. That's just, if there's going to be the same amount of both, if you'd have more now, you're going to have more of the home games later. So that's good. Schedule should get a little better. I haven't actually looked at it
They have
to see how everything
from this
falls,
point on,
but
Orlando has the easiest strength of schedule remaining. And
there
typically
you go.
that's kind of the way it works when you're a good team. When you're a good team, you typically have a more favorable strength of schedule because you're a good team and the schedule.
Right. You're not playing
exactly.
yourself.
You're not playing yourself. You typically will get a more favorable schedule than other because you're a good team, and so most teams against you are unfavorable. It's just how it goes.
Yeah. And we go out west, Danny, for the end of January through February 6th, where we do like a 7-day. We have like 4 or 5 games out west, and then we're home
West Coast
from
swing.
February 8th until March 8th. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, like 8 or 9 games at home, with the exception of one quick trip up to Atlanta. So, that stretch there, those 8 or 9 games at home are they're massive.
And
and
a lot of really, really, really winnable games there because you've got Atlanta, Charlotte, Atlanta, Memphis, Washington, Cleveland, Golden State. That'll be a tough one. Cleveland one will be on TNT, and then Toronto. You haven't played Toronto all season yet, I don't think. Yeah, all 4 games with Toronto, we have not played against them yet. There are a bunch of teams where we're like, we haven't played Atlanta yet, we haven't played Toronto yet, we haven't played a lot of our games against Charlotte or Washington yet. There are a lot of probably some easy wins in there that this team will win even without Paolo and Franz that we just haven't had the opportunity to play yet. We've played a lot of the other teams. Now, we did have that losing stretch earlier against some of the better teams, but I think we've put together enough I think quality wins. And once those 2 guys come back, I think it's going to be okay. And this is more me telling myself than telling you guys. It's going to be okay.
Let's keep repeating
I know, you just got to keep repeating until it's
Well,
true.
I was going to say earlier, and you touched on it, but the fact that their defense has been so strong, and it's really like a team defense, I think that's going to help them. Like Jamal Mosley, what he's been, able to do with the team defense is pretty impressive, and I think that does give them a chance in most games, even without your 2 offensive stars.
At this point, and obviously Kenny Atkinson is going to get the nod because of the crazy start the Cavaliers had at the beginning of the season, but Jamal Mosley for Coach of the Year, we got to start ringing the bells. We got to start sounding the alarms. He's got to
start spreading the
we got to start spreading the news. We got to start getting people to recognize what he has done with a team where he lost not one but both of his stars. He's had injuries throughout the year and is still the 3rd seed in the East. No disrespect to the Cavaliers and even the Celtics to a smaller degree, but they have not seen the kind of injury luck that Orlando has. And Orlando is still sort of right behind them. Obviously, they're going to take probably a little bit of a dip at this point, but the Knicks have been significantly healthier than Orlando. The Cavs have been one of the healthiest teams in the league. They haven't had almost any injury. I don't think they've had any injury, really. Not to the same degree of player that Orlando has. I think Orlando has been really unlucky with the injury bug, and they're still the 3rd seed in the East. If you were to tell me that we didn't have both Paolo and Franz and we were still the 3rd seed in the East at the beginning of the season, I would tell you you're a goddamn liar because there's no way. And yet here we are. And so, there's definitely Jamal Mosley. I think Coach of the Year, he should start getting some love, especially after that win against the Suns, against Bradley Beal and Devin Booker, against a team on paper that should have beat the band of misfit toys that was the Orlando Magic that played against them on Sunday. You got beat by a team where your leading scorers were Jalen Suggs and Goga Bitadze. You are Bradley Beal and Devin Booker. You should have won that game. However, that's not the way that Orlando plays. And basketball in general, it's one of the reasons I love the sport. It's because it's all about finding the thing that you do the best, and it's we do the joke all the time about you can't replace them. You have to recreate them in the aggregate. Basketball is all about breaking the aggregate. It is all about finding what the best shot is and then saying, here's my guy. He takes a shot from 30 feet back there. You say that's the worst shot, but if he makes it every time, then it's the best shot. It's all about sort of breaking what basketball is, finding the things, finding mismatches. Guys where Paolo is a wonderful example of this. He's 6'10", 250. You put a bigger guy on him, he's got enough skill and finesse and speed to go around him. You put a smaller guy on him, he's going to truck you over. He's built different, literally. It is, you have Steph Curry. He he is this guy that, like, he's a small, shifty guard that can shoot from literally anywhere. Yeah, the mid-range shot is bad, but if Steph Curry is shooting it, it's probably not that bad of a shot. You know, there are all of these different things about, like, breaking the NBA and finding your own thing, and I really love that Orlando has just, like, really circled in on, like, defense is our thing. This is what we do. Even if our best guys aren't on the court, if we're going to do anything, we're going to defend. And it is nice to have something like that as a Magic fan who has felt sort of lost in the past decade of basketball, where, like, the three-point revolution was happening, which was started by Orlando. And, you know, the style of play. You know, the three-point revolution is a really interesting thing because, you know, it started however many years ago, and I think it was really popularized by Golden State in the way that they played. And then you saw several teams attempt to copy it. But the problem with trying to copy the Golden State Warriors and, you know, their run, even before they had Kevin Durant, is that they had, you know, you can't make up what Steph Curry and Klay Thompson are. They are literally the two of the best shooters of all time. That's the reason it worked, is because you had guys that were breaking the system and it didn't make sense. You can't just, like, recreate what they did. You have to find your own thing. And I love that the NBA is heading more back in that direction rather than the Celtics are a wonderful example too right now. The Celtics put up a crap ton of threes a game. Other teams are trying to do that, but they can't do it. Why? Because they don't have the roster construction that the Celtics have. They have all of these really well-rounded three-point shooters around that can make a shot, an open shot especially, at any time. You can't do that. Like, you can't just try to recreate that with any team. You can't just say, hey, let's just play the style of basketball they do, because it doesn't work. You don't have the personnel for that. You have to figure out what your style is and how to break the game in your way so that teams aren't ready for you. And, like, if you look at Orlando and you kind of position them against every young core in the NBA, right? When we were looking at the beginning of the season last season, Orlando was looked at next to the Pistons. They were looked at next to Charlotte. They were looked against, you know, Houston. There was a bunch of, like, young teams that had kind of been in the lottery that, you know, were, like, on the, like, up and coming team, kind of like, hey, these are guys, they're young teams, we'll see if they make it to the next level. Last season, I feel like Orlando cemented themselves in the next level up of being like, hey, we are we're here. We are a playoff team. We're going to be a playoff team. And, you know, it felt like even then people were trying to put like a ceiling on it to be like, well, if they don't get the offense going, I don't know, like, maybe the 5th seed is the kind of best thing they can do. Even if you looked at, like, a lot of the, like, preseason standings this year, it was a lot of, like, well, I don't know. Like, is Orlando going to be able to replicate that? And then here they are in the 3rd seed without their best player. And if you look at, like, where a lot of those other teams are and, like, the way that they've constructed their teams, I think I would take Orlando over almost any of them. If you were going to tell me you were going to take Orlando and say you were going to take Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner versus Jalen Green and Alperen Şengün over Houston, which one of those two O's would you pick?
I'm taking Franz and Paolo.
And I don't think it's like a hard decision. I don't discount what Ime Udoka has done over there in Houston. I think they're playing really great basketball. But if I look to the future of that team, without Dillon Brooks and without Fred VanVleet, are they as good of a team? Are they going to be able to one day hand the keys over to their young players to say, hey, usher us into the next era of Rockets basketball when that's all said and done? Because obviously those guys are on the older side. They're not going to be there forever. Dillon Brooks is still on the younger side, but Fred VanVleet is, you know, he's in his 30s, which is like 60 in basketball years. And, he's gonna slow down eventually. So I don't necessarily look to them and go, hey, like, these are the guys. OKC is another really great example of a team where, like, they're very similar to Orlando in their roster construction and the way they have kind of grown players, you know, organically through the draft. And now Orlando didn't have the benefit of having an MVP on their team to go alongside Paolo and Franz, because if you're going to talk about Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren against Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner, I think Paolo Banchero, if I was going to, like, put those 4 players together, is the best of those 4. And if I'm going to compare him to anyone, I'm going to compare him more to Shea, even though I think Shea obviously is an MVP caliber player and is an MVP candidate. I would put him more in that area of player than I would put him in the group for the other three. I think Franz has also started to sort of separate himself from the group a little bit because of his play as a number one option. We'll see what he does when him and Paolo are both back. Look at the other young cores around the league. Obviously, Victor Wembanyama, really crazy prospect, but all about. I am very tired, and now I'm going on a whole different soapbox, but I'm very tired of NBA analysts and people who talk about basketball players. I'm tired of them talking about potential. And I'm tired of them discounting someone for already being good at a skill and being like, but this guy has the potential to be better at that skill. I'm like, well, that's not how that works. Saying this, and we've learned this, Jalen Williams is a wonderful example of this lesson that needs to be learned where, if someone is good at basketball, that does not mean that they can't get better at basketball. And if someone is not so good at basketball, it doesn't mean that they're suddenly in a couple years going to be great at basketball. Victor Wembanyama is this incredible prospect. However, it is still only theoretical at this point. It is the idea of if he can ever get up to that 40% and be off the dribble and kind of shoot it and score it and block and do all these things, he'll be incredible. Yes, he will be that player if all of those things go right. But it's still theoretical at this point because he's not that player yet. However, Franz and Paolo, they are already all-stars. They are already doing these things. They are already these players. And then you have to think about how much potential that means for them going forward, because that doesn't mean they're going to stop at this point. It feels like NBA analysts will be like, "Oh, this guy's a really good player. That must mean he's done developing." But that's not how that works. They're 22 and 23 respectively. They're only going to get better. And so I look at they had the NBA's top 25. We talked about it last week, but the top 25 youngest players, the best youngest players, and Victor Wembanyama was at the top, and I just don't know if I agree with that anymore. I think at some point you have to think about wins, you have to think about who's impacting winning, and you have to think about what players are actually going to realistically move you forward rather than theoretically. Yeah, I said a lot there. I'm sorry if it's hard to follow.
No, absolutely. And I think it's really important. I really like that last point that you brought up because we see this a lot in baseball, which is a sport that I follow, the advanced statistics more of so than basketball. But, at the beginning of the year, we get our projections. But until the pitcher throws the ball and the batter swings the bat, that's all that they are is projections. I can set out an outlook for a team based on their roster and say, well, I think that this player is going to hit 30 home runs. But until the game is actually played, that's all it is projection. You can't project a career with any kind of accuracy. I mean, how many times have we seen an NBA draft pick that was a can't miss, absolutely pick number one, can't miss prospect come into the league and just flame out?
We saw two of them in Philly.
Yeah, I mean, we see this happen so many times. And Victor Wembanyama is playing good basketball. The team is not doing so hot. I mean, they're 12 and 12, which, it's fine. But I'm tired of everyone just assuming that, like you said, that his potential just means he gets to be number one on the list. He hasn't done it yet. It's time to really shit or get off the pot. And, if you're going to be the number one player under the age of 25, then you have to be it. You can't just say, oh, well, I project that he will be because, your projections could be wrong. Chet Holmgren, has a broken hip. He is, projected up there. What if he never recovers from it? What if he's not the same basketball player afterwards? So, I try not to buy too much into the, hypothetical, outlooks of teams 3 years from now because, it's really hard to tell, what a player is going to be. But I'm so tired of the fixation from the media on a player's potential.
Well,
because I feel like
go ahead.
They look so much at the potential that they're not watching the players that are excelling now.
I think they're the biggest issue is that they're still looking to try to figure out who the next LeBron is going to be, but like LeBron is this like freak of nature who could maybe well be the greatest player that has ever played the game of basketball. Like he is to that level where we can have an honest conversation about whether him or Michael Jordan are the best to ever play the game of basketball. You're not just going to get another one of them. It doesn't. That's not how it works. You're not just going to find your next LeBron James. And that's, we talked, we had a long discussion last week about the NBA and not understanding. I think we've had it multiple times. But the NBA not understanding how to market their smaller teams and market new stars because they're so focused on trying to win the lottery. They're so focused on trying to hit the home run. They're not focusing on just getting on base or hitting the single. They're so focused on like we have to score right now. They're not even worried about like the process of it all. And they're not. And it feels like they're just trying to like with every like even with like Ant last year when Ant had his amazing playoff run. They're like, is he the next Michael Jordan? Why do we have to do that? Why do we have to immediately like, is he the next? It's Michael Jordan. Is he going to be Michael Jordan? Like he's just like him. And it's like, no, he's not.
We don't understand his aura.
That being said, I think Ant is an incredibly marketable star. I think he's hilarious, and I think he's like one of the stars they should be looking to market because he's he's unique, he's different. He's a high octane guard that's going to be doing really great things. But yeah, like it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me with the Wemby thing, and like it's why I'm such a stout believer in what we're doing here in Orlando because of the way that we're doing things and because of the sort of the results that we have already seen. You talk to other people around the league, like let's take LaMelo Ball for like a good example. So LaMelo Ball is having a crazy season. He's averaging like 31 points a game. He's shooting like just under 50%. I think it's like 47%. He's shooting about 35% from three. But his team is like dog water. They're booty cheeks. They lose almost every game. They're one of the worst teams in the league. Should LaMelo Ball be an all-star?
Should he or
No.
will he?
Will he? He's going to end up being an all-star because everybody on the East is super injured. Now, should he be an all-star? What do you guys think?
I don't know. This is like
He's shooting 43%
bring up a conversation that
from
we
the field
had.
and then 35% from three. Go ahead.
We had this conversation in one of our group chats a little while ago. Our friend Robbie brought up the All-Star. I don't remember what sport specifically we're talking about, but kind of jumped off into like, what is the purpose of the All-Star game? Like, should you be recognizing like the actual, like these are the best players? Like, if you had to rank based on their career or like this individual season. So there's a whole discussion there about if you think people should be all-stars or not. Now I think since the all-star game just it's I don't know, it's all votes, fan votes for is it all of it
lineup,
or just most of it? I forget
so
how
the
it's
starting
structured.
lineup is fan vote, and then the coaches do everything
Right,
else.
and then the reserves are selected. Yeah. Now, so I mean, I'm not like I don't know, you get the all NBA. That's the real like he's not going to be an all NBA player. He should not be. Now, he should be an all-star, sure. He's scoring a lot. It's not leading to wins necessarily. The team's not great, but I don't know. I don't have any issues with him being named an all-star.
Yeah, I think the All-Star Game's purpose is to sell Hyundai commercial time. So make him an all-star. I think people get all up in arms and they lose sleep about this player being an all-star versus not being an all-star. And honestly,
Yeah.
I'm kind of in the same boat with you, Danny, of like I care much more about like the all NBA teams and the all defensive teams versus like sure, let LaMelo play in the All-Star game. Like it doesn't really matter to me too much. Like I would love to see obviously Paolo and Franz at the All-Star game. But I'm not going to lose any sleep if a player on my team that's like a fringe all-star doesn't make it. It's not going to keep me up at night.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, dang, I wish. But the fact that the stars are all like fan vote, then, that kind of invalidates the whole thing if you want to base it just
I
on
mean, the starters
deserving.
last year, like Dame was a starter last year, and he should not have been. He might not have even been an all-star last year. Like I don't think he was even like to that level. Like he was having a really bad season.
And you can always tell, like, you can always separate the Timothy Chalamet ball knowers versus those who don't know ball. When they bring up, like, well, he was an all-star last year, and it's like that. Yeah,
okay.
That doesn't mean anything to me.
It's like a nice little badge on their basketball reference page.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, if
sure.
that's your entire argument of like, oh, he was an all-star, great, that's fantastic for them, but that doesn't really encapsulate like what makes a quality NBA player that's going to lead to wins on the court.
If anybody wanted my opinion, I don't think he should be an all-star.
Oh, I kind of was gonna guess that was what you were thinking.
No, and like I've got like extra stats. So like he is averaging the most amount of shot attempts by a player ever. And so like,
hey, that's notable.
Yeah, is it a good notable? That's the sort of the issue with LaMelo for me is like I saw a tweet that was like he plays like he has one AirPod in, and I was like, that is exactly the way that he plays basketball. Like he just does not take the game seriously at all, and like I think he's
no, don't get me wrong, I don't think that if I were building a team I would want him on it. I don't like I don't want him on my team, but if he's gonna be exciting to watch, then
and that's like the frustrating part about LaMelo.
I think he
because
fits
he's
all-star.
Like this, he could be like this really incredible basketball player. I feel like if he just took the AirPod out, you know what I mean? Like if he just took the AirPod out while he played and just like locked in, like I think he'd be like incredible. But I just don't have like the confidence. And we're not a Charlotte Hornets podcast, thank God. Because they are.
You would have to go to the Central North Carolina Sportscast for that
they
one.
They are 7-17 right now. Just bottom dwelling with the bottom dwellers of the East, including the Philadelphia 76ers. Take that, Patrick. And they're just not having a good time right now. So I don't want to punch down too much on the Hornets, but like, I don't know, like. Should LaMelo get it, or should it be somebody on the Nets who are 10-14 and are 8th in the East? Dennis Schroeder is having an incredible career, or not incredible career, but an incredible year right now, sort of lifting this Brooklyn Nets team to the 8th seed. When no one thought they were going to be, they thought they were going to be the worst team in the league. The Nets were like, that team is going to be awful. They're going to be really, really, really bad, and here they are winning games kind of in spite of that. You look at somebody like Dyson Daniels. His stats don't like pop off offensively, but he's leading the league in steals by like a very wide margin. Should he make it? I hope that the NBA starts sort of broadening their criteria of what they're looking for and aren't just going to look at 31 points a game and go, oh, 31 points, all-star, I hope they, in relation to like talking about like our like Orlando and like taking Orlando seriously, if they want the wider NBA to take the game more seriously, and I don't mean like more seriously like you got to lock in and be serious when you watch the game and not have fun, but I just mean like in more like be like, oh, none of this matters type of seriously, then they should put a little bit more thought into this kind of stuff. At least I think.
I would love to see him incentivize the All-Star game a little bit more. Just so the game is taken a little more seriously. I know that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day. I don't even know what that would look like.
I think that the issue there is that it's at the top. If your top players, like the top guys in the league, do not care about the All-Star game, none of the other guys are going to care. LeBron has not cared about the All-Star game since he got here. He doesn't care. And if he doesn't care, no one's going to follow. Jokic doesn't even like playing basketball. Like he does.
Yeah, I was gonna say Jokic.
He's like
doesn't care about
he's like
game.
pissed that he has to be at the All-Star game because he wants to go hang out with his horses. Like he doesn't want to be there. Like he is.
Yeah, he wants to.
He has no interest in any of that, and like I respect it, but like you're not gonna get an All-Star. Like the reason those All-Star games were like competitive is because you had guys like Kobe and you had guys like MJ who were like, I'm winning this game no matter what, and that like brings out the competitive fire and everybody around them. There's nobody like that in the All-Star game right now. And even if there is, it's not one of the like top guys. Like if like a young guy just starts going off in the All-Star game like they normally do, the other guys are just like, oh cool, he's scoring a lot of points, and they just kind of let it happen. However, if it was like LeBron doing it and there was like real rivalry and there was like, I feel like that was what would like galvanize and really like energize the All-Star game, but I don't know if we're ever going to see that again until
I think with load management being
Mhm.
what it is now. It's never going to happen. Like, you're not going to have these guys take this game and put real effort into it, because why risk getting hurt in an exhibition game?
Yep.
So, and I can't blame them. Like, oh, I'm still so mad about Nick Nurse
Just in
ruining
general?
Kemba's season. Well, yeah, just in general, but even before this, but that All-Star game where Kemba was with the Celtics, he had knee issues and just kept getting run out in the game. Nick Nurse kept him out there, and you know, knee just didn't hold up, and yeah, all fell apart down the stretch. So I will always hold a grudge for
Nick
that.
Nurse is
That's a-
maybe my least favorite coach in the entire NBA.
That's a terrible nurse.
Yeah,
Purposely
it's
hurting
like you're doing
people?
the opposite. Yeah. Bad, bad, bad.
Nick Nurse has never seen a player on his team ever commit a foul in his entire life. It is a shock to him every single time.
They're all perfect little angels. Well, at any rate,
Well, I think
you
that's
got any more anything more to add here?
I don't think so.
well, that should close us out then. So, thank you so much for listening to the Central Florida Sportscast. Please make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. You can follow us on Twitter at CFS Sportscast and email at CF
Wait,
Sport.
I think it's just
It is just CF Sportscast. Yeah,
you said CFS Portscast. I'm sorry.
Oh, no,
that does
what you
sound
said
very
was-
funny.
was
Like
technically
we're
correct.
A CFS portcast,
Yeah.
like we cover all things at the port of CFS.
yeah. All shipping. This has been a nice 90-minute conversation about shipping containers and cargo ships at the CFS
Oh, man.
Portcast.
You should have heard our Ever Given podcast.
That is CF Sportscast. You can also follow us on Blue Sky at CF Sportscast, and you can email us at cfsportscast@gmail.com. Please feel free, send us your questions. We'd love to answer them. If you email us at CFS Portcast, nobody is going to answer you, though, so I apologize for that. And for all of us here at the Central Florida Sportscast, I'm Adam.
I'm Danny.
And I'm Eduardo.
Peace.
Bye.